Good day, fish tankers. Welcome to the dark land of Mordor, otherwise known as South Africa, where we've got a failing national power supply, which leaves us with power cuts of 2.5 hours each, 3 times in a 24-hour cycle, sometimes, or in a 12-hour cycle, sometimes as much as 4 hours at a time. And we had to solve this problem, and I've made a previous video about it, which I'll link. The cheapest way I could find is simply to get some ACDC air pumps and link them to a sponge filter. Over my shoulder there in the right hand corner, you can see the bubbles coming up. This aquarium behind me has got a hang-on back, it's got an internal power filter, but it also has that sponge filter, and that's driven by an ACDC air pump. So I've got several of them that I've tried out, and I thought now would be the time, since they've been running, some of them almost for a year, others for at least a couple of months. Now would be the time to do a good review of which pumps do what. Now, one thing that's convenient is if you have an aquarium sitting on a cabinet like this one, then the noise factor of a pump really doesn't get into it, because the cabinet makes a very nice job of deafening the noise. You must just make sure, of course, because the pump is sitting underneath the tank, that you have a non-return valve in your airline. That goes without saying, so the water can't back siphon. Okay people, so what do we have here? These are a range of ACDC air pumps. What is an ACDC air pump? An ACDC air pump is simply a normal air pump that pumps air into the aquarium to provide aeration or drive a air-driven filter. It's got your normal diaphragm, rubber diaphragms that it operates on, but what it does have is it's got its own battery, and it's wired in such a way that when the power is on, it charges the battery, and then it just operates from the mains power like a normal air pump. But when the power goes off, it automatically switches to the mostly lithium batteries that these pumps have, and it just carries on seamlessly. That's the big thing, because you can have battery air pumps, so you simply put torch batteries in, and when the batteries are done, you have to replace them, or you get air pumps that are rechargeable. I've got those two. You simply charge them like you do a rechargeable torch, and then you use them until the charge is done. Now those are handy if you simply need aeration for when the power goes off, because you have to go, but the disadvantage is you've got to go and physically put them on and off. And the other thing is, the main thing about these power outages, the main thing that you have to preserve, and touch wood, I haven't lost any fish yet, is your filtration. So if you have, it's not the only filtration I've got in my tanks, there's always 2 filters, but each tank has got an air-driven sponge filter. So a filter you don't want to switch on and off as a power comes on and off, because the bacteria dies, and the beneficial bacteria is the thing that keeps your fish alive. I did another video about load shedding solutions. I'll link it down below. This is just about reviewing the actual air pumps. So that's why these ACDC air pumps, I think, is the cheapest solution, because it will run when the power is on, and it'll keep running when the power is off, and it just keeps running seamlessly through the power outages. So it can drive that sponge filter, so the bacteria on that sponge filter at least, or it could be a box filter with biomedia in, or an undergravel filter for that matter, but the air-driven filter, that bacteria colony stays alive. So if anything should happen there to a bacteria colonies in your power filter, then that is some backup. If there's an ammonia spike or something like that, the bacteria will quickly eat the bad things. So you always have some biological filtration going in your tank if you have at least 1 filter running all the time. The cheapest way to do this is with these ACDC air pumps. Now, there's several sizes. If we go from the left, we've got this little SOBO mini air pump. They're all twin air outlets. As you can see, it plugs in with a USB into the air pump and then into the socket. All of these pumps have those USB plug-ins, or it's got a pin plug-in, and it plugs into your mains. So I just took them off just for demonstration purposes. It's a little less clumsy. So you've got the mini, the SB4000 twin outlet. Now that retails for around between 500 and 600 Rand. That's your cheapest solution. Then here's one that I've tried from BOYU. It's a little more sophisticated. It's a bigger air pump, also a twin outlet. It's around about 10 watts, 2 times 4 liters per minute of air on each outlet. And it's got a adjustable airflow, so you can turn the power up, you can turn it down depending on how much air you need, and it's also got a function where it will blow air intermittently. In other words, it blows the bubbles, when it stops for a few seconds and it blows again. That's for long outages to save a battery. So it's got that extra function that the other air pumps don't have. This retails around about 1,100 Rand, round about there. Then you have also the SOBO ones. These are the AIRBOX models, and this is the 120, the A-12F. Now this one is of course is a bigger one. It's got on, off, and you can also set the power. And then you've got, that's about 1,100 round about there, 1,200. And these over here, that's a top model of SOBO. That's the A-15D. That's got the most air output by far of the different ones, and it's got as well, the power is adjustable, but it also has a very neat LCD display. So these are the 4 air pumps that I've now used for a long period of time on my different tanks. So I'm going to plug them in, and then we can see how they operate. Okay guys, so here we go. This is a mini, the SOBO SB4000. You can see these are the 2 tanks standing on my desk. I've joined the 2 air outlets together here. I like the metal valves, they're just a lot more sturdier than the plastic ones. So I joined the 2 air outlets together. If you have 2 equally sized filters, equally sized tanks, then you won't need to join them together. You'll just use each outlet for each filter. But here I've got a small nano tank, and there is a not so nano tank here, a much bigger tank. So I need more airflow to the bigger tank and less to the smaller tank, which is what these guys are for. Now, as you can see, there's a nice stream of bubbles coming out of that small sponge filter in the nano. And if I look around here, we've got a decent stream of air coming out in the 29-gallon tank. Now, I don't know how well you can hear it on the video. One drawback of this air pump is it's noisy. You can hear it's got that buzzing noise, and I find that is, I suspect the manufacturers want to keep the price down because these lithium batteries are expensive, and then they skimp on the casing, and you can hear it's got a thin casing, and that's what makes it noisy. So if you have an aquarium that's on a stand, on a wooden cabinet that you close, the noise will not be a factor, because I've used it in my bottom aquarium. A small pump together, those 2 outlets can drive a big sponge filter that's on the bottom of quite a high tank, so it needs to pump against a lot of pressure, and it does it very well. And if it's in the cabinet, you don't hear it. So what I would have done if I didn't have a choice, I would put this one in one of my desk drawers, and maybe just make sure that there's a few holes drilled into the side or somewhere where the air can circulate, or I'll build a little wooden box and put it inside there. I've tried opening it and putting filter wool in the cavities of a pump. It doesn't work. I've tried putting it on a towel, on a rubber mat, doesn't do much. So you're gonna have, if your noise bothers you, you're gonna have to put it in a box or on a cabinet or in a drawer somewhere, and with the airline tubing going out to the tank. So that's the one drawback, is the noisiness of this pump. The pluses, it's the cheapest one in the 500 rands, as I've said, and it's got packs decent punch. As you can see, it will drive 2 sponge filters without any problem. If it's a really big tank with a big sponge filter that's got to pump hard to get to the bottom, it will do that too. Only drawback to me is the noisiness, and the battery is surprisingly resilient. If we have these 2.5 hour power outages, all these pumps work equally well, but some of the pumps did not work so well when the power outages become 4 hours long, because they don't have enough time to recharge in between. But this one, when we had stage 6, and we have 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours, and then 4.5 hours without power during the day, during the cycle of a day and night, then these pumps last. I haven't seen their battery run down. I haven't seen them losing power, nothing like that. So it's a real little workhorse, very good money, good value for money. Just the only drawback, it is a little noisy. In your fish room, it's not going to bother you, but I'm here in my lounge slash office. Me and the missus sit here and we watch TV, and the TV then drowns it out, but sometimes I don't like that buzzing noise. So that is the drawback and the pluses of this little one. If that's what you can afford, by all means get it, it will save your fish. Okay, on to the next. Here we have a BOYU. What model number is that? S-1801. Now, as you can hear, the same thing as the small SOBO. The casing, that's where they save a bit of money to make the pump not so expensive, although this one is just over 1,000 Rand, if I remember correctly. And it's running on its maximum now, and as you can see, it drives these two filters quite comfortably. A little bit more oomph on it than the SOBO mini twin outlet air pump, but for the difference in price, there's very little difference in air output really that you can see in real terms in the water column. Slightly stronger at its maximum than the little one, but now it's more feature rich. For example, you can see you can adjust your airflow here. You see there, I turn it all the way down. If it's turned all the way down, it's just barely stays alive. And then I can just do it all the way up again. You see there's a little indicator, and there we are pumping again. Then it's got one more feature. You can do the intermittent feature. Then you'll see it runs and it stops for a while. And there it goes again. So that's still enough to keep your tank circulated and aerated, and still enough to keep your bacteria in the filter alive. And the idea here is that the battery will last longer. Which brings me to the next point. I've never run it on the intermittent feature. I prefer to run it continuously. So if I did use the intermittent feature on this pump, probably would not have been a problem, but I have found when we reach stage, I think it's stage 6, is it, when you have these 4.5 hour session without power. I found when that happens for a couple of days running, then the pump becomes weaker and weaker because the battery does not have sufficient time to fully charge. So if you are on these big load shedding schedules where you have 4.5 hours without power, I would put it on the intermittent function. I didn't do that, and then the pump became weaker and weaker, and I just put another one in there, and I turned it off, and then I just let it charge for a good couple of hours, and then it was working fine again. So that's the thing with this pump. You know, it's the most feature rich of the pumps, but it's also a little bit on the noisy side, I think. And on the continuous function, when the load shedding starts going into the long outages, the battery eventually wears off, and you have to turn it off, plug it in, and give it a long recharge. So then you maybe want 2 of these pumps. So that's what I think of this one. Okay, now we're sitting with a SOBO AIRBOX. Now this pump can also adjust the power up or down, and as you see as it's running now, it's running pretty nicely on both these filters. I can see now it's running at its full clip. You can see there what it does. So this one is a much bigger pump. It's still only 10 watts, still the same as the BOYU. You can also adjust the flow. It doesn't have an intermittent function, but it easily handles long power outages. These stage 6s with 4 hours without power doesn't do much to it. It just keeps on running. It's a real beast, this one. And the other thing that I like here, finally, I don't know if you can hear the difference. Maybe I can tilt it here. but this one is as quiet as they come. Even normal run-of-the-mill air pumps, I have not had a quieter air pump than this one. So this is the one that I use here on my desk, where there's also the living area and there's no cabinet to hide it in. This is definitely the quietest air pump. It's got all the air you need, plenty of air, and it is silent. By far the quietest. So if you are in a room somewhere, you don't want to DIY a little soundproof box or fashion it into a cupboard drawer or something like that to deafen the noise. You just want to use a pump as is and you want it as silent as possible. This is your go-to. I would definitely recommend this one. As far as the settings go, what I don't like, these little Night Rider lights, it's hard to see on what power level you're at. Okay, now there you can see we're more or less on its minimum, and if I want to get it up back to the max again, I just keep pushing until that light bar is full, and here we are again. Okay, so that is the A-12F. That's definitely your quietest air pump. It will last through all the power outages. It's got plenty of battery backup. So I like this one if it's going to be in your living spaces. Which brings us to the final one. This one is still only 10 watts, but it's got by far the most air capacity. Same as the previous SOBO AIRBOX. This is the A-15D. This is the top number model, as we like to say in South Africa. It's got flow control, but what is better than the previous one is you've got this neat LCD display. So you can tell here by reading the display that we are running at about 43% power. So we're nowhere near at the maximum air output, less than half, and the battery is 100% charged. And at the moment I haven't got it plugged in. You can see the indicator, it's running on battery power, not on the socket power, which you will see if I plug it in. The socket will just take over, and when the power goes off, it just runs seamlessly on the battery. Now this one is by far the most powerful pump. If you want to power a couple of tanks with one pump, this is your go-to. You have a very big tank where you want a couple of air-driven filters or air curtain or something that you want to run, bigger fish. This one is your go-to. I use it on my bottom tank, but as you can see, it's now on the top tanks, but it only uses less than half of its power capacity. If I run the power up, you see now it's way too much. It's going to spill over. Going to spill over. Going to spill over the tank rim. The drawback with this one, once again, you see it's not one single mold. There's parts and there's panels on the casing, which is a manufacturing, not error, but it's something that I could have done better. So it is more noisy than the black AIRBOX that I showed you just before this one. So once again, I'm quite noise sensitive. This will irritate me if it's in my living areas. You do get used to it, but do you want to? So I put it underneath a cabinet. It's great for a fish room, but it does make some noise. Certainly not as noisy as a little pump, but you can hear that buzzing. So in terms of features, in terms of value for money, in terms of the amount of air you get out of it, and in terms of staying power, this one is definitely the best. But in terms of noise, I would go for the black AIRBOX. I can't remember the model name now. The one just below it, it's about 100 Rand or 200 Rand less. I would go for that one if it's in my living area, simply because it is silent. But if you have something in a fish room, or if you're not noise sensitive, then I would go for this one. It's always funny how the manufacturers never can get it quite right, you know. They get some things right on one model and then another few things right on another model, but they never combine the two. If you could take this AIRBOX with an LCD display, which I think is quite handy, and combine it with a casing of a black AIRBOX, you would have a perfect ACDC pump. So SOBO, if you're listening, please take note. Put this one in the casing of a black AIRBOX. Then we have a silent pump that's really a good workhorse. So that's my reviews on the several ACDC air pumps that I have used. It's definitely something that you should buy if you're staying in South Africa. I see you guys in America also have a lot of weather and troubles with storms and stuff there. You know, you're having power outages. I would suggest see if you can get some of these. I suppose I'll be on Amazon. I know Aquarium Co-op has got an ACDC air pump that keeps running like this. It's a much smaller air pump, but you have that available to you guys at least. But if you need the bigger ones, maybe you must start looking at importing these. But we don't have Aquarium Co-op products here in South Africa, so this is what we've got. So alright people, that's my review of all the ACDC air pumps to get through your load shedding woes or your power outages, to keep those domestic denizens of the deep healthy and swimming up and down our tanks. So until we see each other again, if you found the video useful, please give it a like, give it a thumbs up, please share on your networks and in your various groups, and please also subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate that. So until we see each other again, happy fish keeping.